So let's get started. We're going to actually begin not with sustainable products, but with pads and tampons. I suppose many of you do, or at one point did use pads or tampons, but how many of you guys actually looked into what was in your pad or your tampon? Or ever looked at it when you were buying it, for example, on the packet? I tried that and I realized that it doesn't matter whether or not whether or not you actually look for it, because companies don't write what is in the packet, what is in the pad on the packet. So it took us about a month or so to actually figure out what was exactly in the pad, and I'm going to show you guys today. I've broken apart a pad. You guys can see that it has, basically you have these 4 layers in it. And this is the top layer. Okay, I hope you guys can see that clearly. This is the top part and this is the bottom sticky part. Yeah, so the top part is made out of something called polypropylene, and the bottom part is made out of something called polyethylene. So they're both forms of plastics. Before I move on, I want to also let you know that the last layer is the siliconized paper. This is the one that you would typically wrap your pad in and throw it away. Although the right way to throw away your pad is to wrap it in newspaper, put a red dot on it, and then dispose it. Please keep that in mind. It's the least that we can all do. Then you have the inside layer. Okay. So here, this part and this part, they're mainly made out of something called rayon or viscose, which is essentially processed wood pulp. Yeah. And it has a lot of fragrances. You know that typical period smell that you get? Yeah, it's because of your pad. It's really not your blood. It's the fragrances that are added in these. There's also something called super absorbent polymer. It's a polymer again, which means it's a form of plastic. And that basically increases the absorption capacity of your pad up to 30%. And there is one other ingredient here, which if you guys can actually comment, it will just see if you can guess it. What do you think makes your pad this white? Just take a wild guess. What do you think makes it this white? What do we use to whiten clothes, other things? So it's actually bleach, which is, to be honest, a little scary. I mean, imagine that, we use bleaches in toilets and on the floor, and we're actually putting something as dangerous as chlorine bleach that close to our body, that close to our skin, and in a place that is so permeable. Each pad, so the bleach that is in the pad, it releases a chemical called dioxin. This chemical is extremely harmful because it basically leaches right into our bloodstream, lymphatic system, that area. So the whole vaginal area is very porous. There's very little filtration which happens. So any chemicals within the pads, they kind of just get absorbed into you. This dioxin, it ends up accumulating in your fat cells, and it can stay in your fat cells for up to 20 years. Just imagine that, 20 years. How many pads do you guys think you even use? You're using at least about between 10 to 20 per cycle, even if every single pad releases a tiny amount of dioxin. That's a lot of chemical going into your body. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of dioxin. First time I read about it, I had not heard about this. But it is one of the dirty dozen, which means one of the 12 most toxic chemicals listed by the World Health Organizations. It should not be anywhere near our bodies. It really shouldn't. We should not be taking that inside our bodies. We should not be having it in contact with our skin. Yet it's in our pads. Because it just accumulates, our body does not know what to do with this chemical. How does it break it down? So it leads to things like you have abnormal cell growth, you have cancers which develop, cervical cancer, ovarian cancer, you have pulmonary diseases, there's so many different diseases that's linked to this, high blood pressure. Obviously, many of these diseases haven't been scientifically linked to it, just because there's such little research that's actually done on this, especially periods and sanitary napkins. The companies have managed to hide all of this information very well, and it's not that easy to come across. But if you've noticed, your blood is a lot more clumped on pads, you probably get way worse cramps. A lot of girls are suffering from PCOD today, which was not the case before. You have, I mean, I know that personally I got a lot worse cramps when I used to use pads compared to now. You also get itching, you get rashes, a lot of these things. And I'm sure many of you experience it as well. I also want to tell you a little bit about tampons. A lot of people feel that, okay, if not sanitary napkins, we should use tampons. It's probably creating less waste, so it's better. The bad thing about tampons is that they are basically everything that is in your pad, except compressed into this tiny little thing which goes inside your vagina. It's no longer outside, it's actually inside your vagina. And this is a lot worse because the chemicals cannot directly seep into your lymphatic system and blood system. There's not even the filter of your skin there anymore. And I just want to show you guys what happens when this actually goes into the water. Yeah? Do you see the way it just bloated up there? That's not the glass, that's actually, it just bloated up. I can lift it and show you guys. This is how it looks once it's inside. It bloats up a little bit more because it's in for longer, but this is what it does. So just look at how fast it absorbed everything. When this tampon is inside you, it basically absorbs every single liquid that's there in your vagina, which means that it's completely drying out your tract. It's not only taking in the blood, but it's also taking in all the good mucus, everything that keeps your vaginal pH level normal. So the chemicals are entering your bloodstream, it's drying out everything, and at the same time, the chemicals are also interfering with your pH levels. It also leaves behind, so if I lift this up and show you guys, if you guys can see, it very easily like leaves behind strands. And this is what happens when you guys pull it out. Okay, so when you pull it out of your vagina, it starts leaving these little strands, and this is extremely harmful because they're actually, again, woven spun plastic, and they're basically staying in your vagina for who knows how long, and they just sit there. If you guys have heard of the disease called toxic shock syndrome, I don't know if many of you have, but it's caused by a particular bacteria in your vagina, and it happens when the pH balance of your vagina is off. It happens a lot more if you use tampons, simply because it's changing the pH of your vagina, and that's giving a favorable environment to that particular bacteria. It's directly connected to tampons. It's not completely linked to pads, although there have been cases. And it's a deadly disease. And personally, I find it very scary that we're putting all of these weird chemicals, things that we barely know about, that close to our body. And, I mean, just think about how many you're using. If you take 10 to 20, multiply that into 12, and take that for around 30 to 40 years, because that's how long we usually menstruate for, that's nearly 9,000 to 12,000 pads and tampons in your lifetime. That is a lot of pads and tampons. Imagine the number of chemicals that you are putting into your body in that much time. When I first heard about it, I was honestly a little scared, a little shocked that I didn't know about something like this. How is it okay that we're sold something like this and we're not told about it? We use all of these pads. It's terrible for our bodies, and then we don't think twice before we throw it away. Where does your pad go? Where does it go after you throw it away? We all wrap it in that silicone paper or newspaper if you're more responsible, but we still dispose it. In Pune, at least, where I'm speaking from, there aren't enough incinerators for medical waste, let alone menstrual waste. So most of these do just end up in the landfill. And they sit and they rot in the landfill. And it's not only chemicals at this point, it's also my organic waste. So it's a combination of organic waste and chemicals, and that's coming together to create a really, really toxic substance which just leaches into the ground. And this is what we're contributing to. In India alone, you have 432 million pads which are disposed every year. And this is not a reliable number. It's not like this covers every single pad thrown away. I'm sure that there are way more. There are just not enough there's just not enough documentation and research on this. And also, this is just 13% of India's population using sanitary napkins. If you know, a lot of NGOs today go and hand out free sanitary napkins. They in villages, slums, and imagine if all the Indian women were actually using sanitary napkins or tampons. How much garbage would we generate? It's just 10 to 13%, which is generating 432 million pads. That's almost 9,000 tons. It's not an okay amount at all. I just think that it's really important for us to know what we're using, whether or not you do decide to switch to something alternative. That is completely your choice. But as consumers, we should know what we're using. Yeah, the economic aspect. Thank you for reminding me. A sanitary napkin usually costs between 7 to 10 rupees. And when you're using that many sanitary napkins, you can do the math. 9,000 sanitary napkins, you're spending at least 90,000 to a lakh in your lifetime on just sanitary napkins. And that is a lot for anyone. These pads are heavily taxed. Tampons are heavily taxed, and they should not be this expensive. The whole idea that sanitary napkins are the cheap alternative for people in villages and slums is not at all true.
Okay, so so we will talk about that a little more when we talk about each alternative that we talk about, because pricing is different and the way you would buy them is also different. So I'm going to talk about two main things now. One is biodegradable pads and the second is cloth pads. So I think we'll start with biodegradable pads because they're a lot more similar to using sanitary napkins. The whole process of using them is identical. Even the disposal could be the same and it would still be beneficial. So I'm just going to show you what a biodegradable pad looks like. So this is what it looks more cream colored or what you would call off-white or something like that, because it is made from natural fibers. So most biodegradable pads are made from bamboo fiber, banana fibers, organic cotton, and sometimes they also come with biodegradable bags like the outside wrapping. So if you can see, it says this is a biodegradable bag. So once you have used the product, you can actually put it back in the bag, seal it, and then you can dispose it either with your other waste, or you can actually bury it if you have a small garden, if you have any pots of plants, and you can bury it in the soil and it will biodegrade in 2 to 3 months, which is 60 to 90 days. So which is not that much, and it is a lot better for you as well as the environment. So like she said, you're reducing a lot of waste and you're also ensuring that your body is not exposed to any harmful chemicals. Now most of these sanitary napkins which are biodegradable, they are made with the thought that they need to be a lot more safer for our body and the environment. So they contain no toxins, no parabens, and no harmful chemicals for our body. So they're very safe to use. And they also come in different sizes, different capacities. So just like you have normal pads, night pads, and larger pads, you have the same thing with these pads. They also have wings. They have a sticky layer in the back. It's literally identical, and it is a lot better for your body. So if you do want to shift to something else, but either you have some sort of hesitation or you don't feel comfortable with other products, they're not convenient enough, then I would say that biodegradable pads are a great way to go ahead. Yeah. And we do have a very extensive list of all the Indian brands who make biodegradable pads as well as cloth pads. So we can have it shared after the live session, and that way you can also purchase these. Most of these you can subscribe to, so in a way that they will keep delivering to you on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis, or you could buy them in bulk, whichever way. Right now they're not that easily available in person, so if you do want to buy them, you will have to do it online, but it is still a very easy process, and I would highly recommend it. Biodegradable pads go right from 3 rupees per pad to 10, 15, 20, 25 rupees per pad. So the higher end is kind of open ended. So there are pads which are a lot more expensive, but there are also pads which are a lot more cheaper than what you would already be using. So if you can make that sort of comparison and see if that's comfortable with you, then I think price wise also you could actually be saving money if you do switch to this alternative. So I have a bunch of cloth pads, and I want to tell you the basic function of it. So for thousands of years, women have been using cloth pads, and they have been healthy, and they have been using it properly. Recently, in the past 30 or 40 years, there has been a huge upsurge in the amount of women using sanitary napkins, and now part of that is through telling people that cloth pads aren't healthy or aren't sanitary. So now I want to talk about that first, because your moms or even you might have used cloth pads at some point, and cloth in itself is not harmful for your body at all. It is actually a lot better. It doesn't have all these chemicals. It is breathable fabric, so your vagina is not actually creating a hostile environment for bacteria to grow in. So it's a lot more safer in that aspect. Now, what they say when they say that cloth pads aren't healthy is the way you take care of them. So now the most important thing with cloth pads is that this is what a cloth pad looks like. So these are the stitched ones. Earlier women were just using cloth. So
I
this
also
is
had
what it looks like. Yeah, so I can show some things. Now this is one that which has wings. This is a relatively smaller one. You can get panty liners in the exact same manner. They have these wings. Okay, so this is what it looks like. There are two interesting designs which are helpful for women who don't want to dry something that looks like a pad. So this is a one that has wings on the back, and it essentially opens up like a handkerchief. So when you're drying it or washing it, it doesn't look like a pad. So in communities where it's harder, or if you live in a congested area, this is an easier option. So this is the problem that they were talking about, or we hope that they were talking about when they say that cloth isn't healthy, is that women feel so ashamed, and they feel so uncomfortable to dry their cloth outside, that they would actually dry it in very dingy corners or in their bathroom under their other clothes. So basically it's not being dried in direct sunlight. Now what this does is that it causes bacteria to grow. Now you notice this with all your normal clothes as well, that if they don't dry properly, they have a certain scent, they don't feel right, they are just moldy. So the same thing happens with your pads, and this is something that you're putting a lot closer to your body, so it can actually go inside your body. So that is the problem that we need to face. So saying outright that cloth pads aren't good for your body is absolutely not true. And in terms of sustainability, you can use cloth pads for 2 to 5 years. Again, this is something that you will know on your own a little bit, that you should decide like when you feel comfortable changing them. So I'm quickly going to go through how you would use them. So if you have any normal pad, some of them come with a solid color. So this is the part that is actually going to be on top, and this is how you would clip it to your underwear. So it collects blood, and the top layer, if you see, is either made from very soft cotton or flannel or something that is not, it won't create friction if it moves a lot. and then you have a middle layer which is either cotton in some cases. It has pieces of fabric or something like that, and then you have the back layer. Now some of these pads, some companies have made pads with PUL lining. PUL is polyurethane laminate, which is like a very thin plastic fabric which comes at the end of the very back portion of the pad, so it doesn't leak. Now you can get those, or you can get Eco PUL, which is the same thing, but it will essentially be water soluble after 70 to 75 washes, is what they say. So if you get something like that, then you don't really have the problem of it leaking. One thing is that it does absorb a little bit lesser than what your normal pad does, because pads have a lot more chemicals that can support blood to be absorbed even if it's really thin. So that's not the case with cloth pads, so you might have to change them much more often. So if you're outside and you need to change them, so if this is a used pad, then what you can do is, if this is the part that was on the top, then you have to fold it inwards, and then it has these clips or whatever sort of fastening mechanism or a clasp, and you create this small kind of like a potli, and usually they come with bags like this, and you can put that in the bag and then you can carry it home. A huge misconception is that it would smell a lot, or that it would leak onto other things. That's not actually something that would happen. If you feel really uncomfortable, you can use like a Ziploc bag and it would be fine, but I would suggest a cloth pad because it's breathable. So it's a lot better to use that. And then once you get home, now the washing procedure is what is most important with using a cloth pad. So once you've used a pad, the first thing you need to do is soak it in cold water. Now cold water is important. If you try putting it in hot water, it will stain all the way through. So what you need to do is put it in cold water for the first time, I would say for half an hour. After that half an hour, change the water, and this time you can add a little bit of mild detergent if you feel like it, and you can soak it again for another half an hour. And after that you can kind of do this like what you do with like the tea that you dip. So essentially, if you keep doing that, all the blood will leach out on its own in the water, and then you should be left with a pad that looks very clean. It has no stains, so blood should just come out on its own. That's what should ideally happen. So until that happens, keep either changing water if you don't have the time to do that, and then after that you can either machine wash it if you're comfortable with that, or you can hand wash it. But if you're hand washing it, you cannot use the brush, because it will actually leave strands behind of the fabric, which can easily get into your vagina, which we don't want. So yeah, so if you're washing it by hand, then this is kind of how you would wash it, rubbing the fabric against itself. So it's not actually creating any friction. So that is the way you wash it. And after you wash it, the crucial step is to sun dry it. Sun dry it on the side which was in contact with your vagina, which was actually absorbing everything. So that is the side that should be exposed to the sun. Now I understand that it's not possible everywhere, because either you don't get enough sunlight, you live in a very crowded space where again you don't get any sunlight. So in that case, you can also if you have a dryer, then you can tumble dry it, which is also fine. And if not, you can dry it, but make sure that it's dry completely all the way through. If you feel like it's damp, do not use it. And yeah, so that's basically how you take care of a pad. And if you do that, it is absolutely healthy. It is very comfortable. It feels a lot better than using sanitary napkins. There is a lot less friction. It does not feel wet because it's breathable, so air is kind of going through. And if you have any more questions, you can absolutely ask those. So those are the biggest things about using a cloth pad. Okay, so I'll talk about the range first. So the cloth pads that we see around generally, they go from 150 rupees per pad to 350, 400, 500 rupees per pad. It depends on the size of the pad, the thickness, and if it has a PUL layer or not. Now, the second thing, which is important about cloth pads is not just that it is sustainable and it's good for your body, but many of these companies are also creating job opportunities for women. So it is mostly a women led product, so it is very good in that sense. Now, health wise, I would say that what you need to take care of as a customer is to make sure that your pads are made from organic fibers. Now, what that means is it should be flannel or some sort of cotton, but they need to be organic. So no synthetic materials or fibers should be used because they are not good for your body. Again, we want it to be as natural as possible. Now, the thing with dyes is um, if you can if you can see many of these on the side that you would actually be using, they're solid colors, so which are all right. And if you have darker colors on this side, then the stains are a lot easier to take out. So that's something that I would recommend. But again, there aren't many cloth pads which are on the lower end. And if you feel that you are worried about the health aspect, it is also very easy if you have the outline to make pads of your own. So a lot of women do this, that they get scraps to put inside the pad, like the inner layer, and then they get like top parts which are flannel and never used before, and that way you're also recycling a lot of fabric waste that is going into essentially landfill. So some pads, they have like an inner thing which can be taken out, and it's like a whole layer. So I think range wise, right now, the pads which are available, which we have looked at, none of them are very cheap, I would say. So quality wise, we haven't faced any issues. Again, we would be sharing the list. So those are the ones that we recommend and the ones we have used personally, so we can actually vouch for them. Now, if you are using a pad that is damp or has not dried completely all the way through, it can lead to infections like yeast infections, which although is very common and is very easily treatable, it's just something very easily avoidable. So I have been using cloth pads for the past 8-9 months, and I haven't faced any difficulties with it. I find it a lot more comfortable. And again, the point of this to have multiple options with your sustainable products is because different things work for different people and their lifestyle. So I would say health wise, there are no problems that I have faced so far. If you're taking proper care of it, there are no health disadvantages in that sense.
Ecofem is selling pads right now, so you can order Ecofem cloth pads online. You can also order Carmessi and Heyday biodegradable pads. We'll put out these names on our page later, but you can also remember them, Heyday and Carmessi. So these are the three that are definitely selling right now. We'll try to find some more which are selling online at the moment.
This is a great time. Like she said, we are at home, so there's a lot more comfort. You don't have to worry about like your hectic schedule. So these two are great options. And yeah, so if you can, please consider them or see if you would be able to switch to any one of them. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can keep messaging them, and yeah, one of us will answer it. Okay.
Okay, we'll talk about menstrual cups now, and Reva is going to join us to talk about those.
Okay, so Sayuri just spoke about cloth pads and biodegradable pads, and now this is one more alternative that you can use while you're on your period. This is called a menstrual cup. I'm pretty sure most of you have not heard about it or have no information about it. So yeah, what is it made of? It is made of medical grade silicone. Now, what is medical grade silicone? It is used in most of the medical procedures to make medical equipments, and it is like whenever something goes inside your body while they're doing medical surgeries, this is the material that they use. So it is not harmful for your body at all. And unlike pads and tampons, it doesn't leave any trace behind. Like while you're using a tampon, it leaves some chemical, some in fact it even leaves some, what do you call it, like that cotton that comes out, it stays inside your body. But this cup doesn't leave any trace behind. So it is very safe to use because it is very, very eco-friendly. So yeah, if a cup is made of medical grade silicone, then you should go for it. If you're buying cups, then this is one thing that is most important. So yeah, this cup goes inside you. It goes inside your vagina, and pads and tampons they absorb blood, but this cup collects your blood. Like the blood gets collected inside it, and then you just dump it and you reuse the cup. So you can use one cup for up to, like the companies say that you can use the cup for 10 years, but yeah, you can use one cup for up to 7 to 8 years. So that is one more good thing about this cup. Okay, so how do you use the cup? So as I said, this cup goes inside your vagina and it collects blood. So how do you put it inside? Now it does look a bit scary and it does look a bit big, but you don't need to be scared. So yeah, there are a couple of folds that you can try, which makes it easier for you to insert it. So yeah, I'm going to show you a couple of folds. One fold is called a C fold or a U fold, for which you press the top part of the cup and just fold it like this. So it looks like a C or a U, and as you can see, the size also gets the size also decreases, so it's easier for you to put it inside. Then the second fold is called the shell fold, where you just pull the top part towards you like this and leave your hand. So it looks like a shell, and in this fold, this part gets it becomes really tiny and it gets bigger gradually. So most of the people find this fold very helpful because it gets the tip gets really tiny, so it's very easy for you to insert it. I'll show you the fold again. So you press it from one side and you just pull it towards you, so it becomes really, really tiny, and it's much easier for you to insert it. Now the most important thing you have to keep in mind while inserting the cup is that the principle on which the cup stays inside your body is that it creates suction. Okay, so for it to create suction, there needs to be no air inside the cup while you're inserting it. So you have to press it and make sure that there's no air inside the cup, so that right after you insert it, it opens on its own and the suction gets created. And like when you like put a cup on your mouth and then you just like it stays there, right? Like that's how the suction gets created. So you can that's probably the only thing that you can relate to right now. So like the more you pull it, the better the suction gets created. So that's how you can make out if the suction has gotten created or not. So you push, you make the fold, you make sure that there's no air inside, then you put it inside and you just let it be, just remove your fingers and then it goes inside and the suction gets created. I spoke about the folds. Now I'll speak about a couple of positions that you can try, because every person's body is different. So one position might work for someone and it might not work for the other person. So there are a couple of positions. One is you can probably just, some people can just stand up and put the cup inside. That works for them. Some people prefer squatting down and then putting the cup inside. Or you can maybe try putting one leg down and one leg on top of something, so that that works for some people. So you can try changing the position, keep on trying different positions to figure out what works best for you. And see, this is a learning curve, so it's not like I can tell you which fold and which position will work for you. You'll have to try it out, you'll have to give it some time, you'll have to relax, you'll have to you'll have to go for it and just try it out, and something or the other will work for you. And after you figure it out, every time it's going to be very easy. It's not like every time you have to change the position and stuff. Only the first few times, till you get the hang of it, you'll have to keep on trying new things. But after you get a hang of it, it's very easy. It's very easy. It does not hurt. So yeah. So I spoke about the insertion. Now I'll talk about how you're supposed to feel after you wear the cup and how to make sure that you have inserted the cup properly. So the cup is supposed to okay, so do you guys know what the cervix is? So the cervix is the opening of your uterus. Okay, so if this is your uterus, this part is the cervix, and it looks like this. Like if you try to put your finger inside it, like you can, if you touch it, it feels like the tip of your nose, like Anjali always says. So yeah, so basically the cup is supposed to fit around the cervix. So if the cup is not around the cervix, if it's just at the side stuck somewhere, then you will feel it, because your cervix has a lot of nerve endings, so you have sensation over there. So if it's constantly hitting the cervix, then you will feel the cup, and you will get to know that it's not like you haven't inserted it properly. And if it is around the cervix, then it can easily move, and you won't be able to feel it. So that is one thing, how you will be able to know if you have put the cup inside properly. And one more thing is that because you're creating a suction, as soon as you put the cup inside, you'll hear a small, like a wait, I don't know if you can hear it, but like a small pop, and you can just feel that it's opened inside, and it's like it slides in. You're not supposed to put your entire hand inside, right? You just put a little bit of it, and then you leave it, and then it opens, and then it goes inside. So there is already a shape inside which the cup fits like perfectly. That is why the cup is made in this way, in this shape. So it fits exactly, it fits perfectly inside your vagina. So all you have to do is make sure that you put there is no air inside, and after you insert it, it just slides in, and you won't be able to feel it. So this is the most important thing. If you're feeling the cup, if it's irritating you, if you can feel that there's something inside me, then you have definitely not inserted it properly. So you can probably try doing it again. You can not try it for some days, and try it later. So yeah.
Sometimes for me the cup just doesn't open, right? So it just kind of gets stuck like this,
Yeah.
even though it's in properly. So what helps me is either pulling up on my vaginal wall. So like the part where the fold is, you'll feel it all the way to the base if there's a fold. Like it'll be folded all the way usually. So pulling up on your vaginal walls helps like the suction come up. Or what you can do is you can push it from the other side. So you can push up the cup from the other side, which will make it open.
Yeah. Or if it's like stuck around the cervix, then what I do sometimes is just pull it out a little bit, and then it automatically opens, and then slides up again and goes around the cervix. So yeah, these are some things people can keep on trying. And again, while you're wearing the cup, you can do all kinds of activities. You can even swim, which you can't do while you're wearing a pad. You can do it while you wearing a tampon, because it goes inside your body. So even the cup goes inside your body, and the suction does not break even if you're swimming, even if you're in the water. You can do whatever. I mean, play all kinds of sports, do all kinds of activities, and we've actually tried doing all these things. We're not just saying. So yeah, you can do pretty much everything when you're wearing this cup, as long as it's inserted properly. So if you're, obviously this is a very new thing that you're going to try, and it is very, I mean, obviously if you're using something new, you're going to get stressed, you're going to constantly think about it, and you're going to get stressed. And if you are not relaxed enough, your muscles will also get what do you call it, like your muscles also will get cramped up, and it will get tougher for you to insert it. So you need to relax. If you're not being able to do it at that point, you need to give yourself that time. You can maybe go for a walk, you can maybe just stop thinking about it for the entire day and try it the next day. You need to relax. That is one very important thing. If you're not relaxed, you won't be able to put it inside. And it's not like you have to get it the first time you try it. So you should give yourself that much time. And yeah, have faith in yourself and believe, and I mean, just tell yourself that yeah, it is going to work out, and not panic. Okay, so I'll talk about the removal now. Yeah. While removing the cup again, positions, you can try different positions like I mentioned before. You can squat, you can stand up, you can sit on the toilet seat, put one leg on top and one leg on the ground. You can try all these different positions even while removing. Whatever works for you might not work for other people. So this is something you need to try on your own again. Then one more important thing while removing the cup is that you should never pull the cup. Okay, this stem, I will talk about the stem later, but this stem is not for you to pull it out. Like you can't just hold, you're not supposed to hold the stem and pull it out. What you have to do is break the suction basically. So it has created a suction inside your body. You just need to break it. And it's not as complicated as it sounds. All you need to do is just put your finger inside and just pinch it a little bit. And as soon as you do that, already you see the cup is filled with blood. So it's already kind of sliding outside a little bit. So as soon as you pinch it, the suction breaks. And then you can just easily slide it out. And while you're on your period, your vagina is very, very lubricated because there's blood, there's mucus. And so it's not like you have to pull it out after pinching it. After you pinch it, after the suction breaks, the cup will help you to come out because it is very lubricated. So it will just slide out easily. So you don't need to worry about that. And the first few times it might get a little messy because you're not used to it. So the blood might come out. So you will also get used to looking at your own blood and being okay with it. Like it's not something that's disgusting, right? It's in fact it's so pure. It's like a baby is supposed to be inside your uterus. So it's the purest blood in your body. So there's no reason to be disgusted by it. There's no reason to feel bad about it. So this is also one good thing that happens after you start using the cup, that you get so much more comfortable of looking at your own blood and being comfortable with it, being okay with it. So yeah, the first few times when you try to remove the cup, it might get a little messy. It might just fall out. So you should make sure that you're not sitting on the toilet, because like on the commode, because it might just the cup might just slip out of your hand. So you can probably just sit down somewhere like on the floor, in the squat position, and then try it. And yeah, so after the cup is out, all you need to do is just wash the cup with water, and you're ready to insert it again. And you should not use soap on the cup because it won't do anything to the cup, but you insert it, right? So it will change the pH of your vagina. So that is why you're not supposed to use soap. You can use soap later to wash your own hands, but there's no need to use soap on the cup because it's made of medical grade silicone. Nothing is going to there won't be anything on the cup. As soon as you wash it, everything will just go. It will become as clean as it is right now again, and you can just insert it again. Now talking about the hygiene part, this is what you have to do every time after you take the cup out. But before and after every cycle, you have to sterilize the cup. Okay, I'm talking about before and every cycle, not after every. Every time you take the cup out, you don't have to sterilize it. You just have to wash it with normal water, and that's it. But before and after every cycle, you have to sterilize the cup just the way you sterilize, baby products like baby bottles or the milk bottles. So you have to boil water and then just put the cup in the water for around 10 to 15 minutes. And yeah, that'll just kill all the bacteria that's there on the cup. And that's all you need to do. Sometimes the cup might start smelling a little bit because of your blood. So you can just keep it under the sun for some time, and then it will just lose all the odor. Yeah, is there anything else you do, Anjali, or this is enough?
Usually, if you're in college and you don't have access to boiling water, what you can do is just use hot water. If you can get at least hot water, usually your dispenser will have it. You can put some baking soda in that and then leave the cup for about 5 to 10 minutes. Some companies, like we'll talk about some companies later, but they also give you a natural, like a cup wash, which, it's best if you just stay away from all sorts of washes and things like that. But if you really don't have any option, you could use that.
Yeah, and one more thing. See, if you're not comfortable with doing this whole process in the kitchen, I can completely understand. That is one more thing. You should be comfortable with that, but then we'll talk about that later. So if you're not, you can just heat up the water, get it inside your room or your bathroom, and then just keep the cup inside that, and that should be enough. So for me, it didn't really hurt at all. Actually, I made a big mistake when I used the cup for the first time. I tried to insert it while I was not on my period because I got so excited when I got my cup that I just tried to insert it when I was not on my period. So yeah, then it did hurt quite a lot. So then I stopped doing it. But when you're on your period, it's very lubricated. It goes inside so easily. I mean, it might hurt for some people. Like, we're being completely honest. It might hurt for the first time because yeah, I mean, if it's going inside your body and you don't know how, I mean, for some people it might hurt. For some people it won't. But one thing is for sure that the first time it might hurt a lot, but every single time it doesn't hurt that much because you get used to it. You know what fold works for you. You know how to insert it. So every single time it doesn't hurt that much. And to be honest, it's not that big. Like, after you make the fold and after it goes inside your body, it doesn't like it. It's not like it's pushing away something and making its own space. It's not like that. There is already this space already exists inside you, and you're just putting the cup inside. So it's not that it's, I mean, it does look big, but that's also because you don't know your body. Like, it stays inside. It won't hurt too much. It's also about your, I mean, if you're too stressed, like as I said before, it might hurt more. So you need to relax, and that will help you more.
Also, think about the fact that a baby could come out of there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is very small. So even if you're a little scared, the first time it's a lot more about your mental strength and just looking through that first, just that one time insertion or removal. It hurts for some people while removing it.
Yeah, can you see there are some suction holes on the cup, which makes it a lot easier for the suction to get created. So a good cup always has at least 2 to 4 suction holes. So yeah, sometimes the blood does get stuck inside these holes, and blood or mucus or something gets stuck inside the hole. So what I do is I just use some, like a toothpick or something, and I just remove it with that. Like, I don't know what you do. Do you want to talk about what you do?
I do that as well. I use a toothpick. I use a toothpick or like a safety pin.
Exactly. You just use something that's pointed and you just remove it. Yeah, that's it. So you will have to do that sometimes because it does get stuck. Like, it has happened a lot of times with me.
I have seen staining in my cup before, not in the one I currently use, but in the one I used to use. So something, yeah. So the first thing is that your cup should not stain, okay?
Yeah.
Even if it's white, your cup should not be staining if it's a good quality cup. If it does slightly change color, usually if you keep it in the sun, it should be fine. Or if it's really not working, like the sun as well, you can boil it in a little bit of hydrogen peroxide. Try to use as little as possible, dilute it with a lot of water. Like I think it's something like 1 part hydrogen peroxide and I think 3 or 4 parts water. You can boil it in that and the color should go. If it's still not going, your cup is really not good because that means it's absorbing the chemicals and it should not be absorbing chemicals.
Yeah. And one thing you can do to probably avoid that is to keep it in under the sun for some time. Maybe that would help. I don't know, because it's not supposed to stain, like Anjali said. If it's a good cup, it won't stain too much.
Or baking soda. So Surabhi is saying baking soda as well. That's also true.
Yeah, maybe. Have you tried it?
I haven't, but I've heard it's worked for someone. So you can use baking soda. Yeah. You can also, just to add one more thing, you can also use a water-based lubricant or a little bit of coconut oil while you're inserting your cup, in case you're having trouble inserting it. I know for some
in case it's hurting a lot, in case you're just very stressed, you can maybe do that. If it's not going inside easily, you can try a water-based lubricant to make the process easier. Yeah. Okay, the stem. Yeah. So you can see there's a tiny little stem. Most of the cups have this stem. Some of the cups don't have it, so it's not like every single cup has the stem. The stem is only you're not supposed to hold on to the stem and pull it out. It's just to help you to locate the cup. After you locate it, you're supposed to again press it, break the suction, and pull the cup out. Yeah, and as I was saying, Indian women are usually shorter, so the cervix is lower compared to the other women. So how do you measure your cervix? So you can just try putting your finger inside your vagina, and like I said before, the cervix feels like the tip of your nose. So when you can feel it, like you can just measure it, like on your finger. You can see how deep your finger could go, and then you know the size of your cervix, like how high up it is inside. You might not need it as well. Like if it is coming out of your vagina, then you can also cut it, because see, the whole cup, this whole thing is supposed to stay inside your body. Now if the stem is coming out, then you can just cut it out, but like don't do it right after using the cup for the first time. You can probably try using it 2 to 3 times, because it it does go up after you start walking or start doing some activities. Okay, now you guys must be wondering how expensive these cups are. There are a lot of different brands. We don't know about it, so we don't know. Like you probably don't expect there to be so many brands available, but there are lots and lots of brands available on the internet. And we have used quite a lot of different brands. Like initially, all five of us were using different brands to see how brands make a difference when it comes to the quality of the cup, the suction and everything, suction holes and everything. So now, what are the qualities of a good cup? So the first one maybe is that it should have suction holes, because the better the suction, obviously, if the suction is not getting created, then the cup won't stay inside you. Then you'll face a lot of problems, like it will leak, or you'll constantly feel the cup inside you. So the cup should have at least 2 suction holes. These 2 cups have 4 suction holes, so that's really good. Then again, as I said before, the cup should be made of medical grade silicone. A bad cup could be made of food grade silicone, or some of the colored cups are not good cups, because a lot of color has been used in making the cups. So you should usually go for transparent cups, because no color has been used in making the cup, and it doesn't really make a difference, right? You're just using it to collect blood, so it doesn't matter what color it is of. So you can, like, a transparent cup is good enough. And yeah, some cups have a stem, some cups don't. That doesn't really matter too much. You can always just cut it if it's coming out of your body. So yeah, it is slightly expensive when you're buying it for the first time, but you can use it for up to 7 to 8 years, right? So you're actually saving a lot of money, right? A lot, because you buy pads every month and you use them every single month. You have to keep on buying new pads. So yeah, you buy this cup once and you can use it for 7 to 8 years. Yeah, this one is manufactured in Satara, yeah, in India.
Just to add a small part onto that, so the rustic art cup is actually, it's for 950, and it comes in a jute bag now, and they also have a cup wash inside as well as the cup with the bag. So there's no plastic anymore in that packaging. It's for 950, and it is also available right now online, because even during COVID, so you guys can buy it.
Yeah, and if you ever want to buy these cups, you can always contact us. And if you want to know which size is good for you, you can just always message us and we can let you know about it. So now talking about the sizes, there are usually some brands have 3 sizes: small, medium and large, and some brands just have 2, small and large. And it has got nothing to do with your flow. So even if you're 17, 18 and your flow is really like your flow is high, you don't need to use a large cup. It's only based on your age. So if you're below 25, we will usually tell you to use the small size. And if you have given birth, or if you're about 25, you usually will have to use the larger, like the large size. So yeah, the sizes only depend on your age, nothing else. Like it doesn't depend on your flow. But still, if you're not sure which size to use, you can always contact us. If you don't know which brand you want to buy, you can ask us. We'll help you out. Yeah.
We can quickly talk about, like, so if you're using a cup if you're not at home, right, and you're using a cup, like if you're in a public washroom or something, you can just take some water with you. So like take a bottle of water into the washroom. You can take soap with you. You can just, like, even if you're camping or something, right, so you can just pour water on the cup itself, just wash it, and you can put the blood in the soil or anywhere, because it's completely organic. It's not at all harmful for the environment.
In fact, it's good for the soil.
Exactly. So just pour it in, wash it with the water from your bottle. Just make sure you're using clean water. So if you're using in your public washroom, make sure you bring your own bottle of water. Please, a reusable bottle if you can, and not like whatever water is available there, just to be on the safe side. I mean, I know we've used it. We've used the cup. We've changed it in some very interesting situations, like a train. I don't know, Rema.
We've used the cup for like 4 years now, so we've tried everything. We've tried all kinds of things, and yeah. So
the other quick thing is that the reason we usually do promote more Indian brands than Western brands is firstly, it's a lot cheaper, it's made in India. And the other thing is that Indian cups are usually made for an Indian woman's body. So Western cups are a lot longer and they can be slightly wider as well. And so they can poke you a little bit. Rustic Art worked for most of us because it was like if you can see, like it's a shorter cup compared to, for example, the Safe Cup. It's an Indian brand, but it
This
is
is a safe cup. You can see that it is longer. And
yeah.
the
So
one
like
I'm
if you
using
look
is
at
this is a safe cup. Yeah.
so the Safe Cup is produced in the US, so the standard size
Yeah.
is the US, whereas the Rustic Cup is produced in India, so it's manufactured for an Indian woman.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to use,
And
just because
also
that's
other cups like which are not manufactured in India are very expensive also. So that's also one more thing, right? It's quite expensive. I mean, if you
and
still want to buy it, you can. But then if you're getting such good cups in India, then why use other ones, right?
also, anytime you do buy a cup, just please make sure that it says medical grade silicone. You can ask us before you buy a cup. Don't buy a cup which says food grade silicone, which does not specify the material, or which says thermoplastic or rubber. So do ask us before you buy a cup, just so that we can tell you whether it's a good cup or
Good
not.
brand, yeah. Or if you're already using a brand and you don't, and if you want to talk about, if you're not sure what it's made of, you can ask us, and if it's not a good cup, then we'll recommend you to buy a different one. So even if you're already using a cup, just make sure that it says that it's made of medical grade silicone.
So right now I will be talking to you all about virginity, like I mentioned earlier, and let's get into it. So virginity actually comes from the word virio, which actually meant clean, green, nourishing, and that's a really nice thing. So how did it reach where it is today? We'll be getting into that. So, virginity as a concept, it means the state of being sexually inexperienced and is often related to the words of chastity and purity. But how is it different from these words? Uh, it's different because the way we view it in language is as a possession. So, we often say things like, um, I want to give my virginity to someone. Can you see this? Yeah, we use it like an object. So I want to give my virginity to someone. Someone took my virginity. Virginity can be bought, sold, auctioned, and also you also use words like lost and virginity is also inspected and checked. So it comes from this, now it's viewed as this material possession, which is what has happened. So how did this happen? Like how did it go from something pure and nourishing to something that is inspected and checked?
So when the Virgin Mary gave birth to Jesus, it became suddenly virginity became this pedestal that women were expected to have. And similarly in Hindu culture, um, during the Vedic period, virginity wasn't wasn't actually something that was actually put on a pedestal or viewed as something that a woman must have before she gets married. In fact, in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva says, if an unmarried woman expressed her desire to have sex, it must be fulfilled, which I think is a revolutionary thing to say. And but during the Mughal period, when the kings had many wives, the wives were expected to be virgins that gave them some extra value. And I think from that, plus the British Empire is where this where checking virginity really comes from. So if when an examiner checks a virgin body, if their belief is fulfilled of what a virgin body should look like, then a woman can get married, she can have a job, she can have opportunities. But if this is rejected, then it can lead to harm, rejection, and even honor killings. And this is not just something ancient, it still happens in 17 countries. And India is one of these countries that it still happens in. And that's why things like virginity surgeries are, virginity restoring surgeries are still prominent. And people ask questions like, when I get a pelvic exam or wear a tampon or a cup, will I lose my virginity? Or also, they also ask things like,
if I have anal sex, that means I won't lose my virginity, right? And there are also other dilemmas that people come across, that their virginity is often checked before they get married, and that is very degrading. So let's unpack that. So these all of this is done because of one uh, primary anatomical myth, which is related to the hymen. So, so this is that the hymen breaks and breathes the first time a woman has intercourse, and it disappears or radically changes or is altered after a woman has intercourse. So you would be able to see that, like the hymen looks different, or she has blood on the sheets, or something like that. But this is not really true. We often think that the hymen is like this wall that covers the entire vagina, and when you have penetrative sex, that this is very violent, but it goes something like that. Like it breaks this big wall, which is not the case. More than 50% of the women have a vagina that, I mean, a hymen that looks much more like a scrunchie, and it only surrounds the edges of your vagina. And with every period it breaks down, and 50% of the women also have a hymen that is stretchable, so it will never break. In fact, more than 100 years ago, there was a study done on a middle-aged sex worker, and when her hymen was examined, uh, you could see that, like what the doctor said, the exact comments were that it is like that of a teenage virgin who has never had sex. And then so your hymen doesn't look one particular way. In fact, a fully covered hymen is very, very rare. Only 0.3% of babies have that, not even adults. So by the time you're an adult, that is almost impossible. Other types of hymens for the other 50% is one that looks like a donut, then one with loops and holes in it. And yeah. So another interesting thing is that, just to prove that there is no way of finding out whether a hymen is broken or not, there was another study done on 36 women who were 36 teenage pregnant girls, and only two of them had clear signs of penetrative sex. So unless you can have 34 virgin births, I don't think there's any clear sign that can say that your hymen is broken. Another study that I won't elaborate on was done on 4,000 women, and it reached similar results. Then why is this information being kept from our societies and from women? It's because for years your virginity is something that has been used to control the possibilities for a woman, and it's also something, it's a tool of sexual repression that has been used to control women for this long. It's the medical community has known for so long, but people still sell things like bags that women can tear so that it looks like they bleed after sex. They can have surgeries even though they know this is a myth, so it's very planned out. But the truth is that by any material reckoning, virginity does not exist. It cannot be weighed on a scale, or sniffed out like a truffle, or smuggled like a bundle of cocaine, or retrieved from the lost and found, or photographed for posterity. Um, it's just that you cannot look a woman between her legs and know her sexual story. And that's it. Like, that's it. And like Reva mentioned earlier, I think the hymen can be broken during normal activities like climbing a tree, etc. It can also be broken during when you walk. That's when you walk. That's the most basic thing. How can you not walk? So the more people know about this, the better it is. So your hymen, you do not lose your virginity when you use a cup or a tampon. And a less violent way of talking about sexual experience could just be saying that I have not had sex yet, or I will be having sex, instead of guarding it as this
and putting it on this pedestal. Yeah.
Hi, Surabhi.
Hi. Okay, so I was thinking I'll talk about a couple of things. If you have any pre-existing conditions like PCOD or tilted uterus or anything, before you use the cup, you should probably consult your gynec just to be sure. And yeah, so the other thing I wanted to talk about is period poverty. And what is period poverty exactly? It's when people cannot afford essential menstrual care products. And we know that they are super important because half the population of the world leaves every month. And in so many countries, this is still being taxed by the government. These products are being taxed and they're not considered essential. Even in India, we know that even when the lockdown started, the government forgot about sanitary, and we know that they did not really think their plan through. So only about 20% of India's population has access to or uses sanitary napkins or disposable products, and 80% still rely on other methods such as leaves and sawdust or whatever that they can get their hands on, cloths. And I'm sure you guys have talked about this before, but this is just super not hygienic and it's super unfair that we live in a democracy and this is happening. And this is not just a problem in India, it's also a problem in developed countries like Canada and the US, where like the US right now is facing tampon shortages in the pandemic. And yeah, so I think we need to talk about this and we need to figure out a way so that everyone has access to it. And if that means making these products free, for example, then that's something that the government should do, but also taking into account the climate crisis and everything that's going on with the world, it's such a good idea. This is the best time to make the switch, and you would not get a better time to make the switch. This is the best time to make a switch to non-disposable products, to alternative sustainable products. And I think throughout this session and throughout our work, what we're trying to emphasize is that regardless of what product you use, it's your choice. It's your choice, and you have that choice. You have that choice to make that decision, because we grew up in a world where we only knew that sanitary napkins existed, and we don't want to live in that anymore, and we don't want girls to live in that anymore. We want them to know that they have a choice in using whatever product they want, which could be sanitary napkins or tampons or cups, or anything, but you have the choice. Yeah.
And also just the whole notion that anything that is not a sanitary napkin is a privileged product, that's not true at all. We broke down the costing before, we broke down so many different things. It's as much the right for a woman living in a village to use a menstrual cup or a cloth pad as it is for someone who is living in, I don't know, just is economically well off in, let's say, a very big urban town. It should be available to everyone. And the idea that we need to introduce sanitary napkins to certain parts of the society, whereas sustainable products to the other part of the society, is not true at all. It's available to everyone. Why can't a menstruator in a village use a menstrual cup? What is stopping them? It's just that we need to talk more about it. We need to make sure that everyone knows how to use a product like that. And we need to access everyone.
Do you have any questions?
You can also email us. You can also email us if you would like us to set up an online session for you and some of your friends or some of your family members, people in your society. We are taking sessions online through Google Meet. And we can send you a link and you can just forward that to everyone that you'd like for to join the session, and we can organize that for you. So you can email us, you can DM us for that. And yes, we will also share the product list. I think this was really nice though. We will try to go live more often. Maybe we can talk about some medical issues and stuff next time. But definitely do join and do reach out to us for anything that you need, and if you would like to get involved with us or if you have any questions.
Yeah, and please don't hesitate to contact us with questions. We're always happy to answer questions.
So stay safe, everyone, and hopefully we will see you guys soon.